So we have Dave Eubank, the founder and head of Free Burma Rangers. Um, if I could describe you guys in one sentence, I would say you are a Christian aid group that goes to some of the most dangerous places in the world and gives support to the oppressed people in those regions. And that support would be uh, it would either be defense support, medical support, or even food and shelter, any sort of support, right? But I'd like to hear from you. What is FBR? How did you start FBR, and what is your mission with FBR?
Free Burma Rangers is a humanitarian relief organization open to all people of different faiths, ethnicities, in conflict areas where we're invited. So right now that's Burma, Iraq, Kurdistan, Syria. We've been to Sudan. And so our mission is to give help, hope, and love. Most of that help is humanitarian assistance, medicine, food, shelter, clothes, hope, reminding people they're not forgotten, and love. Even if we have nothing left to give them, I'm with you, I love you, I care. And to get the news out, to put a light on what's happening. So we've got over 100 teams in Burma, and a team in Iraq, a team in Syria. And since the Iraq mission, the Syria mission, you were with us, now we have a full-time team in Syria and in Kurdistan. And so all these teams are ethnic and local people. We have Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, spirit worshipers, Yazidis, atheists, agnostics, Christians, myself, but bound together by love. And we have 3 rules to be in the Rangers. You got to be able to read and write in some language so you can do good medicine and reporting. And you do this for love because you don't pay the teams in the field. And courage. You can't run if the people can't run.
Awesome. And well, first off, where are you calling from, or where am I talking to you from?
I'm in Karen State, Burma, at a little base here where we are training young men and women how to go back and help their people deeper inside Burma in the cities. And I'm about depending on the route we have to go, about a 5 or 10 day walk from Dawa camp that you've been to, further south.
Wow. Awesome. And can you give me just a little info on how is it going in Karen State right now? What's the situation in Karen State?
Well, Burma is in its 72nd year of civil war, longest running civil war in the world. And the Karen have been fighting the central government of Burma all that time. They were a ceasefire about 5 years ago, but even then the Burma army every year broke the ceasefire. But then when the coup happened this year, February the 2nd, 2021, the lid came off completely, the gloves came off, and the Burma army not only grabbed Aung San Suu Kyi and the elected government and put them away, they began to increase their attacks against the ethnic. So just north of me in what's called Papoon district, northern Karen State, there's 24,000 newly displaced people hiding in the jungle now from ground attacks and airstrikes. Up in the Kachin, there's over 3,000 people hiding and everyday airstrikes. There's already 100,000 before that were already hiding. And the Rohingya, who are a Muslim minority, there's over 1 million of them total in Bangladesh, just still stuck there. And meanwhile, in the cities in Burma, the Burma army is killing any civilians who dare stand against them. They've killed over 700 now during different protests. So we're in the middle of all that situation. And our appeal to the world is, please care. Give immediate humanitarian help to those in need. There's many ways and channels to do that. Recognize the newly announced National Unity Government of Burma, which are the duly elected leaders, and the ethnic groups as well. And help intervene to stop the killing, either indirectly strengthen the ethnic groups in the Burmans or come in and do it yourself, but don't just watch it.
Okay. Yeah, let's definitely jump into that. First, I want to hear a little bit about kind of hearing the story of how did you start working in Myanmar? So I know you've told the story that you felt led to help in Karen State, Myanmar, and you just one day crossed over from Thailand with your newlywed wife, I believe, Karen, and you kind of just jumped into the void and did that. What were some of the fears or doubts that you had going into that? And what was the experience that you can share with us of kind of jumping into help? You talk about people don't just watch, go in and help. What was your experience of your first time going in and helping? Because not a lot of people were doing that.
Well, for context,
Yeah,
I grew up in Thailand as a son of missionaries, Christian missionaries who are wonderful people. They love the Thai people. They're still there. My mom's 89, my dad's 91. They're still here. And I grew up in Thailand. I grew up hunting in the jungle with the Karen and Lahu peoples. And then I went to university in America. I was commissioned as an Army officer in the infantry, and then later Rangers and Special Forces. After about 10 years, I got out and I started at seminary. So the Wa leader, the Wa are animists, mostly they're spirit worshipers. They were headhunters before until 1979, 1980, because they said the spirits told them to do that. And they've stopped headhunting, and they're one of the most powerful military tribes in Burma, but they're mostly animists. But the foreign minister was a Christian. And so when he got to Thailand, didn't get any help, met my parents, and he pointed a picture of me with my Green Beret Special Forces uniform on that was in my parents' house and said, "Is that guy a Christian?" "Yeah, he's leaving yes, he left the army, he's in seminary. Send him here. We need warriors, and we need warriors who follow Jesus." This is what the leader said.
yeah.
We can't force anybody to believe anything, but we want someone who's coming for love. I got a phone call. I was in Washington State, in between school semesters at Fuller, visiting Karen, who refused to date me. She would go climbing. I just climbed Mount Shuksan with her, which is not an easy mountain. And, but she didn't call it a date. And I get this phone call from my dad saying, "I got the Wa foreign minister from Burma with me in the living room in Thailand. Can you come?" And I remember thinking, I prayed and said, "Yeah, I think this is what God wants. I'm going to come." I turned to Karen and said, I wish you'd marry me, but I understand you don't want to. I'm out of here. I thought that was over. And you asked, what was I afraid of? That was the only thing I was afraid of. I was never get to be with the woman that I loved the most in my life. And I thought, okay, God, but I'll give it up for you. And I followed my own way, and it didn't work well. I'm going to follow your way. I'm going to trust you, God. You're going to give me what I need. Yeah. So as I got ready to leave, Karen said, "You're going back to California, right?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Can you take me?" I said, "Sure." And I thought, that's weird. When someone asks you to marry them and you say no, you don't want to be near them, right? I thought, oh, she kind of likes me. There's no way she's going to drive, 2 days down to California from Washington with me. Yeah. On the way down, we stopped at my friend, John Nash, who's our first webmaster. He was my Special Forces signals operator and sniper and champion karate guy, super soldier, super guy. He was down in Carmel at Defense Language Institute learning another language in Special Forces. So I said, "Honey," I didn't say honey in those days. I said, "Karen, we'll meet you. We'll spend the night at my friend's house." Okay. Well, we got there early. He wasn't home. So I took her out on the beach, and we're sitting there, and I asked her to marry me again. And she said, "Well, I don't want you to go to Burma without me. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to do that." I said, "I know what you don't want, but do you want to be with me? Do you want to marry me?" And she goes, "Yeah." Super unromantic, even though it was a full moon on a beautiful white beach, and we're the only ones on this little private beach in Carmel. But I knew it was real. I said, "Well, think about it." The next morning, we walked out to Lover's Point, which is a beautiful place in Carmel. I said, "Were you serious about last night?" And then she jumped in my arms, kissed me, and said, "Yes." And that was kind of romantic. But It was more like a used car negotiation. I was definitely the used car. And in more ways than one. So I just thank God. Wow, God, you gave me an amazing woman. So we were married in Malibu, and then we went up into Burma extra legally. We had to find a way to get to the Wa. That was 1993. That's how we started. So we started with an invitation from the local people.
Okay.
Later, as the fighting intensified in 1997, we were asked again to help the Karen. And I remember going into the jungle thinking, I'll help one person, they'll be glad, and I'll be glad. I have no other plan. And then out of the jungle stepped, I think you've met Ilya. Comes Ilya, "I'll help you." And then step by step, we became what was known later as the Free Burma Rangers. We had no name. We're just going into the fighting areas to help people. Later on, that was 1993, 1997. And then in 2015, when ISIS had a good control over about a third of Syria and about a third of Iraq, we were asked by some friends, a friend of mine, Victor Marks, hey, can you send a team to Iraq? You guys don't have any safety rules. They need help at the front lines. So I just felt God opened the door, because actually when I got that invitation, I was in Burma, 2 months walking. And the message was, be in Iraq in 7 days. It's going to take me 2 months to walk around all the enemy units between us. Okay, well, God, if you want us there in 7 days, it's going to be a miracle. We prayed, and the Burma units that were blocking our way the next morning moved and came to attack us. But they left an opening. We went right through it. Long story short, in 7 days, we were in Iraq. Unbelievable.
That is incredible.
And we're at the front line at Bashika, looking at the black flag of ISIS in the Nineveh plains. You know, Mosul was also called Nineveh. I remember that's where God sent Jonah to tell the people in Nineveh, change your evil ways and turn to God. I love you. I'll forgive you. And now ISIS had Nineveh, had Mosul. So from 2015 to 16, we're helping the Kurds. In the middle of that, a man named Bashir that you met from Syria comes out and goes, please help us in Syria. So we got involved in Syria. And then at the end of 2016, the Iraqis wanted help in the Battle of Mosul. And by then, the Kurds had defeated ISIS in Kurdistan. So we went from Kurdistan to Syria, back to Kurdistan, in the Battle of Mosul. When the Battle of Mosul was over, we continued our work in Syria. So everywhere we've gone, it's been an invitation for people on the ground saying, please come and help us. And we've, in my opinion, by God's grace and opening doors, we've been able to go.
That's incredible. And how have you been asked by other groups? Have other groups reached out and said, we've heard what you've done in Kurdistan, we've heard what you've done in Myanmar. Can you please, like, there's so many places in the world, how you can't be everywhere at once. Have you gotten requests from other countries, to people in other countries for help? And how do you help?
We were invited to Nigeria, to Central African Republic, to consider going to the Ukraine, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh. Yeah. All of those invitations we took seriously and we prayed. But every one of those, as we made preparations to consider going, they all fell apart for one reason or the other. So I thought, okay, we don't need to go. Yeah. But we're open to go anywhere. As you said, we can't go everywhere. But I feel if God wants us to go, if the local people want us to go, we have the capacity to go, we'll go. Yeah. And it's very evident that you guys have a huge impact wherever you go. And one thing that sticks out to me with the work you guys do is, number one, you empower the locals there. It's not an FBR show. It's not a Dave Eubank show. It's serving the people that you're working with, which what I saw in Iraq and Syria was that you had so much trust of everyone that we were working with. What is the importance of empowering the locals you work with in Myanmar and Kurdistan and Iraq? What is the importance of that, and how does that empower them in that situation? Well, I think the reality is it's their country. Yeah. And they're actually empowering us by letting us come and do anything, right? They don't have to let us do anything. We're not so special. Yeah. And so it's their country. We're in their hands. And we're that extra drop in the bucket. And that's all we are, is a drop. But as Bashir in Syria said, Dave, we're all just drops in God's rain. But when we come together, it forms a river. And so I think one of the things we do is we come in and say, God sent us, because we really believe that. We're at your service. All these assets are yours. How do you want to use them? And then usually my family's with me, and they go, oh, you brought your family. You must not want anything from us. You must think American life is as precious as a Syrian or Kurd or Iraqi. Yeah. Well, that builds trust. And then, as you've seen, we have really good ethnic from Burma medics, videographers, really good people that are professional. And so when they can save lives or help or play with the kids in a good way or give food and medicine, you're like, okay, this is a tiny group, but it's pretty much value added. You don't have to pay for it, and it's free. Yeah. And then, because it is their country,
Yeah.
Those that want can join us and run their own operation there. And the tenets are the same. Do this for love, forgive people all the time, reconcile as much as you can. Sometimes you have to fight people, and that's true. Sometimes you even have to kill people, but that doesn't change the human heart. And that's the last resort. You're always trying to find a way for love and for understanding and forgiveness and reconciliation. That's the main job. Help the people and then get the news out. So because of that, for example, here in Burma, we have trained over 5,000 rangers. We've got 100 active teams. And now with these increased attacks in Burma, along with this new thousands of people fleeing the cities that want to be trained, Burmans, totally different than the normal displaced people, we are able to help both at the same time because these teams, as you saw, they have trust all over Burma because they do what they say they're going to do. And they have no rank. They're not going to boss you around. They're just going to do something. And they're under the authority of the local leaders. So the local leaders don't feel like we're a threat because we're under their authority.
Okay.
And now we're able to function all across Burma. I mean, small, we're tiny.
Yeah.
But I like it. And I remember once I was giving a briefing back in the United States to the United States Special Operations Command, because that's where I came from long ago. They were like, how does FBR work? Why does it work? I said, well, number one, because of God. But if you don't like to use the name God or you don't agree with that, then use the word love because of love. And if you think that's too soft, use the word commitment. Whichever word you choose, it comes down to that. It comes down to really the same thing. I'm here because I care and you count as much as me. And, as you pointed out at the beginning, you can't be everywhere and do everything, but you can do something. You can do one person and they're one thing and they're glad and you're glad. And that's the beginning of anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like it's a purely serving attitude, right? That's one thing I've seen is you're there to serve, solely there to serve. There's no personal interest or personal gain that you're receiving from this. It's purely to serve, right?
Yeah. And what we get out of it is we get a fulfilling feeling, spiritual, that, wow, this is where God wants us. We get a feeling of love when people say thank you, you see a kid smile or a patient get treated or someone get food. That's great for your emotion, your heart. Intellectually, I'm against oppression. Wow, I get to be against oppression and for these people. And then physically, we get to drive around the desert or run through the mountains. It's fun. And so we get a lot out of it. We feel useful. And I think, people want to feel useful. And I'm just grateful to God and the people that we're with that they let us be useful.
Yeah. That's amazing. With that, let's go into the coup in Myanmar. So why do you believe this happened? Like, the Burmese military essentially had control of Myanmar already. I've heard theories that the general Min Aung Hlaing was afraid of getting tried in The Hague if he retired, or I've heard that like maybe the citizen leadership in Myanmar wanted more Chinese intervention and investment, and that was an existential threat for the Burmese military. But none of that really, to me personally, none of it really makes sense why at this time they would stage a coup. And do you have any insight into that or any idea of why you think that happened?
Well, I'm not sure myself. My opinion is that the Burma military did the coup, which they probably had as a contingency from the very beginning of giving Suu Kyi and the NLD any chance at all. I'm sure they had a contingency in case it didn't go the way they wanted. But I think when the election happened most recently, the NLD won so much. I think it triggered three things. One was pride. Wait, you're not that much more popular than us. You're getting all the accolades. You're starting to push into our territory of honor. And so pride, their pride was hurt. Second, greed. Anytime you share power, you share resources, you share percentages, you share profits. It's just the way it is. And so now you're getting less of everything. So that greed drove them to do. So pride drove them to do the coup, greed. And then I think behind greed comes anger. How dare you do this? How dare you do that? You're really mad. And then the last one is fear. How far is this going to go? Maybe I'll lose all my money. maybe I'll lose all my prestige. Maybe I'll lose my life. I better get a control of this thing. And I think when they went after the NLD and the Suu Kyi and clamped down, they revealed what you already said. People knew the army was already in charge. Most people knew. Well, now it's clear. And they're going to have it their way. They're not going to dance anymore with this pro-democracy thing. It's not working.
Yeah.
At the same time, they attacked the ethnics for the same reasons, I believe. It's like, we've had ceasefires. We didn't really get what we wanted. You ethnics didn't really fall apart. You didn't play the game we wanted to. Let's just call it what it is, war. We're going to smoke you. And so it's two attacks at once.
Okay. Did we see, how big was the increase in Burmese army attack on ethnic states since the coup? How drastic has the increase been?
Steady increase. So in northern Karen state, we had almost 4,000 IDPs before the coup. And from 1 February of the coup to now, mid-April, we're at 24,000 IDPs. So we jumped up 20,000 IDPs in northern Karen state. We went from 0 recent IDPs. Every place has IDPs. There's over 1 million IDPs or internally displaced people in Burma already, over 1 million. But talking about recent IDPs, we went from 0 IDPs in Duplia, southern Karen state, to 1,000. We went from 0 IDPs here in 7th Brigade to 1,000. Mostly that's from the towns. And then up in the north to 24,000. Up in Kachin, there was 100,000 already in hiding. There's over 3,000 more just got into hiding. There's airstrikes every day in Kachin. So it was quite a jump up of attacks by the Burma Army. And the first attacks in Karen state in over 25 years. And the first attack I've ever seen in Burma at night by Burma jet fighters. So it means they've been increasing their technology and improving the military during this time.
Okay. Is there a potential for, in 2017, 750,000 Rohingya fled to Bangladesh. We had a massive refugee crisis. There's a big refugee issue on the Thai border with Myanmar. Are we going to see a bigger refugee crisis maybe in India or China that also borders to the north, or Laos? Is there any chance that we have a huge IDP issue now. Is there going to be a refugee crisis as well that we see for the future?
Well, I don't know, but yeah, I'm not sure. As you pointed out, there's a large refugee population in Thailand now, and there are many in Burma that could flee. But it really depends on the ability of the Burma Army to dominate the area. If they can't dominate the whole area, people will stay. They just go over one mountain to another place and just kind of move around. So it's too early to tell. The 24,000 who are hiding, they're not wanting to go to Thailand. They're still staying in different valleys and mountains around their old villages. In India, over 100,000, according to my friends in India, over 100,000 people from Burma have already fled into India. There's no refugee camps there, and they're hiding among families and populations. So, and then there's 3,000 young people that have fled from the cities to the Karen area. But I think it remains to be seen.
Like Yangon, Mandalay. And
Yeah. And it remains to be seen if that number grows. And that depends on the ability of the Burma Army to continue their attacks.
Okay. And the people fleeing from Yangon or Mandalay or the Bamar region, they're fleeing to Karen State. How are they interacting with the people in Karen State? Is there any sort of coalitions forming? Any sort of step towards a counter movement with the Burmese army?
Well, one of the first things the Burmans say from the cities to the Karen in the mountains, we're so sorry that we didn't stand up for you. Now we know what it's like to be attacked by your own government. Please forgive us. Thank you for giving us sanctuary. What can we do together? And then from the Karen, I just was meeting with Karen leaders yesterday. They said, we have to support them. It's morally right. And politically, it's the only way we're going to be united for a representative federal democracy in Burma. So I feel everyone is hopeful they can find ways to work together. And one of the ways is the ethnic support of the civil disobedience movement in Burma. And there is
Yeah.
support now for training and for support of young people going back to their cities and being part of this civil disobedience movement.
That's amazing. Do you think that could be like kind of like the silver lining with this whole situation is like you look at the NLD and they're very I guess you'd say like Burma ethno-nationalistic. You look at Aung San Suu Kyi with the Rohingya crisis, and to the international community, she kind of defended the Burmese army during the Rohingya crisis, and it was a very like Burmese identity, even with the National League for Democracy. So I can't remember what's the new the new coalition of representatives and leaders.
NUG.
What is it?
Well, the first one was the Committee Representing the Parliament, CHRP,
Okay.
CRPH,
CRPH.
CRPH, Committee Representing the Unity Parliament, and the last two words were Burmese. But then from there, the CRPH and others formed the National Unity Government.
Okay,
NUG.
right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I wanted government nationalities for unity, which would be GNU. But anyways, they went with NUG, National Unity Government. And a lot of them are my friends, and they're good people. It's a very good team they picked.
Yeah. What do you see for the future for them, for the NUG?
Well, these are some of the top people in Burma. Some were elected in the previous administration.
Right.
Some were not. And leaders of the civil disobedience movement, for example, high quality, wonderful people. 3 I know pretty well. The rest I know of, and well respected. I think they've got to try. Like one of my Karen leaders who's here, he said, this may be our last chance. We've got to take this and go. So no one knows what will happen, but there's a feeling of we're going to give everything for change in Burma. It may take time. We're going to build this coalition between Burmans and ethnics, and any way we can do, with the civil disobedience or the ethnics defending their land, any way we can break down the Burma army, and inviting the Burma military and the police, saying, you're our brothers, you're our sisters, we'll forgive you, we need you in this country, but we don't accept this way. There's two messages. And that's our hope, is that together we can be part of a positive change in Burma. Yeah,
it's amazing. Because to me, it feels like in the past, there's been almost in like the Yangon region or in the Burma region, there's been this almost a facade of improvement in the country where you have a lot of economic investment, you have a form of democracy that's still overlooked by the Burmese military. But in the ethnic states, it's been stalemate civil war for decades, right? So this seems like this is the one chance to kind of, it almost like all the skeletons in the closet in Myanmar are kind of all falling out right now. Do you see like, it feels like this, in what's happening right now, it feels like, it could go out into full scale civil war. It could kind of fizzle out with a military dictatorship. Is there any way to tell where this is going? Is there any way to tell, like, I don't know, like it could go so many ways at this point. And it seems like like you said, it's a very pivotal point for Myanmar. Is there anything that suggests that you know where it's going?
Well, I've never accurately predicted anything the Burma Army would do.
Yeah.
But what I see that's happening is I see a desire of people, especially the young people, to stand up against this dictatorship. And you see it in over 700 dead. You see it over in the thousands wounded. You see it in the people that keep going out. What I also see is a unity between the civil disobedience movement and the ethnics. And what I see is these people being trained in ethnic areas and sent back to help. I see the ethnic sheltering people on death list and arrest list here and helping them escape. I see the ethnic armies at the Chin not only stop the Burma Army onslaught, but take 6 of their camps now. They took back 6 camps. They're standing up against them. The Karen Army took 2 Burma Army camps. getting
Wow.
bombed. They were bombed every day after that. They didn't give up. And so I see, I don't know where it's going to end, but I see we're in a good way, the best we can do. And we're not responsible for tomorrow. We're just responsible. What's the best you can do right now? What's the thing of love? What's the practical thing you can do? And I see a lot of it all around me.
That's great. How has the last 3 months differed from your, well, since your childhood, but I guess the last 30 years, 25 years experience in Myanmar? Like, what do you see now that's different from what you've experienced over the last quarter century?
Well, I see a much more technologically capable Burma military. Nighttime airstrikes, Chinese-made drones, video, photographing, videoing, reconnaissance aircraft, doing intercept and imaging of the Korean positions. The same in Kachin. I see much more use of heavy weapons and bombs than before. But on the other hand, I see a greater unity among the ethnics and the Burmans than I've seen before. I've seen the capacity of our teams is amazing. We've got teams operating in every conflict area of Burma. All I really need to do is pray for them and get them funds. They're on it like that.
Yeah.
We, for example, when we were at about 6,000 displaced that needed food in northern Karen State, within 2 weeks, we were able to get rice to all of them. Although a lot of you had to carry on your back. It was so well organized, so fast. And I thought, wow, we've never been more efficient. So I see that. And I feel that what's different is that the people in Burma have had enough and they're not going to accept the dictators.
Yeah.
And I hope the international community supports them.
Yeah. Do you think some of that efficiency in the ethnic states, or even some of the unity amongst Bamar people and ethnic groups, do you think technology played a role in that at all? Do you think increased communication in Myanmar has helped maybe build some empathy for one another, or even awareness of, like, say, the Rohingya situation was a big problem on Facebook? Most people thought that it was a lie that the Rohingya people were being prosecuted, or they were told that the Rohingya are terrorists and that they're burning their own homes for sympathy. But now we kind of have, it seems like there's a lot more empathy amongst such an ethnically diverse country. Does communication, like technological communication, play a role in that you've seen? Or?
Yeah, I think just the other night, I was on a Zoom call with one of the leaders of the CDM, a Burman. And at the same time, I was talking to a parliamentarian who's part of the new National Unity Government. And then there was another advisor in a foreign country. And then there was my own team. And then there was the chief strategic advisor to Aung San Suu Kyi who escaped. Wow. And so all of us could be speaking together at the same time. I think that helps a lot. And I think also the ethnics now, not most places in the jungle, you have no phone signal. But in some places, there is a signal so they can see, oh, this is what's happening to people in the streets, and it motivates them to help.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Do we know where Aung San Suu Kyi is right now? Do you know where they?
I don't know. I understand she's being held in their capital, Naypyidaw.
Okay.
And the only one allowed to see her is her doctor and her lawyer.
Okay. What do you think? I mean, what do you think the future for Aung San Suu Kyi is? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope that she survives and is set free. And I hope that from this experience, she will support the federal democracy and the rights for the ethnics.
Okay. In terms of foreign interests in Myanmar, to me, it feels like Myanmar has kind of been left almost on its own. Besides economic investment, socially has kind of been left to its own devices over the last couple decades. But do you see any chance that there can be like physical, kinetic intervention between Myanmar and foreign countries? Like, do you think that maybe China will bring troops in? Do you think the US will intervene anymore besides like economic sanctions? Can India get involved? Like Thailand? What's the possibility for foreign intervention besides sanctions or funding the military or ethnic groups?
I'm not sure. China has reinforced its troops on the border to protect their gas pipeline that comes out of Burma and to prevent refugees from fleeing. Thailand has done the same. India, the same. India has pushed back many people. So my appeal is they would stop doing that and let people have a place, a temporary at least place to hide. And Western communities have spoken in support of the Burmese resistance, of the NUG, of the CRPH, of the NLD, of the ethnic groups, of the civil disobedience movement. I haven't seen a lot of practical help yet, but I hope that's coming.
And what would the practical help be? Because
I think the first thing would be funding. Funding so that every displaced person could be fed. Funding so that the CDMs in the cities would have food, medicine, supplies, communications equipment, where they could securely communicate together. Funding for schools when you're in the jungle and your school was bombed, rebuilding that. These are all issues that could be helped with money. Another thing is recognition of the ethnic groups, give them the same political recognition of the NUG, National Unity Government, as the legitimate government of Burma. And I think that give them a seat and then start talking to them as if, well, they are the legitimate government. I wouldn't talk to the others. I think these are steps that could be taken that are not fatal for anybody, but are very useful.
Okay. And when you say legitimize ethnic states' governments, do you mean allow them autonomy within Myanmar? Like I think Wa State is fully autonomous, right? Or compared to other ethnic states. Yeah.
What I mean is recognize them as part of whatever future government there should be. So recognize the KNU as a legal and truly representative body that represents the will of most Karen people because they have elections. And then organize meetings between the CRPH, the CDM, the different Burman groups, along with the KNU, and say we're going to help you figure this out together as equals, and make that a public policy and a public act that not only helps the unity between the ethnics and the Burmans and gives the ethnic legitimacy, it is a way of ignoring the dictators in Burma, saying, we're not dealing with you. We're only dealing with these people. You're not relevant to this. And you're putting a lot of pressure on them that way.
Why has leadership in the ethnic states been so ignored and repressed and delegitimized with the Burmese government and the Burmese military?
I'm not sure. I think one has to do with Burma is about halfway around the world from America. So there's many countries on the way there, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Iran. I mean, oh my goodness, Mexico down below, and all these issues crowd out Burma. And they're not, Burma's the country in Asia. It's not very close to us in culturally or in so many ways. But I think it's important country, number one, because the people are there and everyone counts. Second, economically and friendship, relationally, tourists, it's much more fun to go to Burma when it's run by a friendly government. And then strategically, a government that was friendly to the West would be much better than a government that was a tool of China.
Definitely. But also, I mean, the ethnic states have been delegitimized by the Burmese government as well, right? Why, why did the NLD not stand up for ethnic states' rights when Aung San Suu Kyi was in power?
Well, I'm not sure. I think one reason was Burmans are the majority, 60%. They're focused on their interests.
Yeah.
Second was there's been a long war. I think some of the people in NLD did not like the ethnics. Maybe they'd lost loved ones in that war. And I think also a third reason is a lack of appreciation of the reality of Burma, that you cannot do it without the ethnics. They're 40% of the population.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that what I see, like you talked about earlier, the silver lining of this whole thing is that ethnics and Burmans are working together, and the Burmans realize the ethnics need a place. They need a Bill of Rights. They need because they're going to get outvoted every time because they're a minority, but they need certain provisions and protections.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's incredible that you hear that pro-democracy advocates in Yangon are in Karen State training and working with.
Right.
It's incredible. First off, have you seen some of these trainings? Like, what are they training for? Is there a potential for like full scale guerrilla warfare in Yangon, or is it more just like diplomatic training and relationship building, or what's going on there?
Well, some of the people are being trained, joining the Korean army and training in military skills
Okay.
to go back and fight in some way. But the people we've seen mostly are training, number one, to love each other, actually to love God. And if they're not religious, to say to love, something higher than us, to love each other and not give up. And then we give physical training, medical, all of the parts of medical, first aid, casualty evacuation, triage, patient management, and also diseases. We train in information. How do you get information? How do you make good reports? How do you make accurate reports and timely ones? And communications. How do you use your phone? What are apps to make it safer? How do you use a radio? How do you use hand and arm signals? Safer yet. How do you use codes? And then some other physical training, how to swim, how to life save, how to rappel. You might need it to get out of a building.
Yeah.
And physical toughening and conditioning. And one of the students asked a visitor, the visitor was a Burman actually, to the training, what are you getting out of this? He said, love and self-confidence. So when they're trained, they're going to go back in. And again, I'm not sure what they're going to do. They don't belong to us. Our job is to inspire and train and support them. But our first feeling is build a network, build relationships all across Burma. If you're going to do something, practice something that won't get you killed. Go to the police station with a bunch of flowers and some food and say, this is for you. We want you to know we're protesting because we want freedom for everyone and we don't agree with this government, but we're not against you. We need the police. We need the military. We don't be afraid of it. You could do little things like that and back off and keep building your network.
Yeah, that's really incredible. So some of these meetings, this is FBR run, or is this KNLA on their own or KNU on their own, or is it all intermingled?
We're all working together.
Okay.
All working together to help each other in our own areas.
Wow. That's incredible. Has anything
You're welcome
like,
out here.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Has anything like that ever happened before? Have you seen anything like that before? Or is it just, I mean, I guess there'd be no reason for defectors from Yangon to come to Karen State, but have you ever seen anyone reach out like that before?
No, never. However, before we got here in 1988, many students ran to the jungle and with the help of the Karen formed the all-student ABSDF, All Burma Student Democratic Front. And they formed a small army. That happened in 88 and it fell apart. But since then, I haven't seen anything like it. And this is a different feel of it. This is love, passion, unity, a desire to stop the dictators at all costs, including their lives.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, there must be, with your relationships in Myanmar, are there people in like the American government? Are they saying, hey, does the American government have a big interest and a vested interest in Myanmar right now? Or is it passive, or are they coming to you and saying, hey, how are you? I know you spoke with some people in the military. Like, it seems like you have a good opportunity to be a liaison between the United States and Myanmar, and ethnic states in Myanmar and Burmese. Is that important that the United States get involved in Myanmar, or is it something that maybe the United States should let develop naturally? What's your take on that? And are there people in the United States asking you like, hey, help us build relationships out here?
I think it's important for the U.S. to be involved because it's morally right to help people who are being shot and killed, little kids as well.
Yeah.
And we have the power to make a difference.
Yeah.
I would welcome any help from any country, including the United States, to support the civil disobedience movement, support the ethnics. We haven't seen a lot of support yet, but I hope that changes. We have seen the American embassy in Rangoon really try to protect people who fled to the embassy, and we're very grateful for that.
How many people, do you know how many people fled to the embassy in Rangoon or in Yangon?
I don't.
Okay.
It's I don't want to say too much about it because it's a very thin ice everyone's on. There's a lot of people that are helping, a lot.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, because I mean, right now the Burma army is still cutting out internet service for people in Yangon, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We have internet going on and off, phones are going on and off.
Yeah.
And so we have to try to communicate in between all that.
Yeah. Have most of the activists in Yangon fled the city?
No, but a lot of the leaders have. A lot of the leaders, once they find out their names on the arrest list, which usually means they're going to get killed afterwards, tortured and killed.
Yeah.
If they're on the list, they have to flee. No, or not all of them, but most of them have.
Okay.
But they're still working from outside the country or in different ethnic border areas.
Okay. Awesome. Well, before I ask you a couple other questions about FBR, what's the most, I mean, this is an open-ended question, but what's one of the most important things that people need to know about what's going on in Myanmar? I mean, in the news the last month, when it's violent in Yangon, it's in the news, and it's kind of starting to seep out of the news a little bit. Still a big issue, but you know, it could easily fade away if people don't pay attention. So what do people need to know about what's going on, and what can they expect for the next couple of weeks in Myanmar they need to keep an eye on?
They need to know it's the longest running war in the world between dictators and the people. And it's one of the most brutal regimes. And recently, since the coup, over 700 people shot down in the streets, and in the tens of thousands displaced in the mountains of Burma. The fight continues. Burma is using aircraft indiscriminately against civilian population, killing mostly civilians. But people also need to know that the Burmans haven't given up, and the ethnics haven't given up, and the Burmans are appealing. Whatever happened to responsibility to protect, they say. That the UN and the US talked about the responsibility to protect. Well, here it is. Why aren't you coming? So there's a real hope that the world will intervene. But if it doesn't, these people aren't going to give up. And so what people need to know is it's bad, but there's ways to help. And if they feel God lead them, please get involved.
Okay. All right. So on the note of getting involved, I've had a lot of people message me and they say, how do I get involved to help with the situation in Myanmar? And what I tell them is, I don't know, spread awareness and send your money where you can. I usually say donate to FBR. But there's other people. I mean, there's some people who really want to get into Burma and help. I mean, and what would you say to the people who want to do something like what you have done in Myanmar? Can they be of use going to Burma right now, or is funding the best way to be of service?
Well, I think that if they want to come, pray about it and see what you're going to do if you come. And you can volunteer with Free Burma Rangers or other organizations. It's very hard to get here now because of COVID restrictions. Right. So just getting to Thailand, you have to stay at alternative state quarantine. You've got to fill all this paperwork. You spend 7 to 10 days locked up going through their procedures. And then once you get out of quarantine, it's very hard to cross the border. Even when you cross, you've been on the river going up that first leg, that boat was shot and hit by the Burma army. So sometimes there's no boat traffic. You may not get into Burma. It may take you a long time. Make sure you're supposed to make sure you're supposed to come before you just come.
Yeah. So the attacks have hit straight up to the Thai border.
Yes, they have. They drove over 3,000 people into Thailand temporarily. They went back, but people actually fled into Thailand back in March.
Wow. That's unreal. I didn't know. I thought it was because usually attacks in Karen State are far to the west towards the Burma region, right?
Right.
Wow.
Right.
It's insane. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you jumping on here. This was super informative and eye-opening.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Is
Thank
there anything
you,
else?
Stanton. For sharing. And you're welcome. Burma, Iraq, Syria, wherever we're at, please come again.
Thank you. Yeah. Looking forward to it.